Welcome, everybody. We're going to be starting in just a couple of minutes. For folks just joining, we're going to wait a minute or so for other attendees to join the Zoom, and then we will get started. All right, I think we're ready to get started. Thank you, everyone, for joining us at the Business for Impact webinar, Corporate Responsibility in the Time of Coronavirus. I'm going to hand it off to our host, Leslie Crutchfield, who is the Executive Director of Business for Impact and who teaches corporate social responsibility at Georgetown Business School to our MBA students. Leslie, over to you.
Thanks, Joe, and thanks so much for your great work as a senior partner here at Business for Impact. Bill Novelli, the founder of Business for Impact, and I are so delighted to be able to host this webinar today and to have so many students, as well as prospective students, staff, and faculty from across the business school and the university join us for this webinar. We really wish we could all be together in person on campus, and hopefully that day will come not soon enough, but really grateful to have the chance to connect virtually and explore this really important topic to us at Business for Impact. In a minute, I'm going to introduce our very special guest speakers, Bernard Boudreau and Hemal Vaidya. But before we get into that, let me just take a minute to set the context for this session and share a little bit about the lens that we bring to this topic at Business for Impact. It's probably worth reminding ourselves that just a few months ago, before the pandemic hit, Joe, if you go to the next slide, we were in a really groundbreaking moment for sustainability and triple bottom line in the world. You know, we started out 2020 with Larry Fink's new letter to shareholders, stating BlackRock's commitment to divesting from thermal fossil fuels and putting ESG criteria at the top of the list for evaluating their investments going forward. During this academic year, it wasn't too long ago, it was back in August of 2019, when the Business Roundtable issued a new purpose on the statement of a corporation. And those more than 180 CEOs, including Jamie Dimon from JP Morgan Chase, Brian Moynihan from Bank of America, and many, many more, said that, you know, shareholder primacy is giving way to stakeholder capitalism, and the purpose of a company is to take care and address the needs of all stakeholders, including employees, treating suppliers fairly and ethically, the planet, the communities where businesses operate and manufacture and market and sell. Even here at Georgetown University, we've seen a real sea change as Jack DeGioia and the President's Office has announced divestments and other new investment policies that promote sustainability and what we like to call here at Business for Impact, the triple bottom line: people, planet, and profit. And our mission here at Business for Impact is to unleash the power of business to help people and the planet thrive. And our aspiration is that McDonough educated leaders one day will be renowned for your ability to manage that triple bottom line. Just a couple highlights as we look back over the year to remind ourselves of some of the great things that have happened before the shelter-in-place orders took place. We started off the year back in September with the back-to-school barbecue with the Dean's Office, with Honesty co-founder and Beyond Meat chairman Seth Goldman. And it makes me really happy to remember that day and the hundreds of students that came and the 400 Beyond Burgers that you all consumed in less than 30 minutes. Our special guest speakers and VIPs didn't even get a chance to get a taste of the Beyond Meat burger, but we promised to bring them back another time. In October, we celebrated Disability Employment Awareness Month with a great event featuring Carolyn Casey here on the left of the screen, who's mobilizing 500 companies to commit to hiring millions of people with disabilities in the next 5 years. And companies like Omnicom and Northrop Grumman and E&Y and others shared their best practices on disability employment. Right before COVID hit, we had a great sustainable fashion event featuring Vishal Agarwal and CSR leaders from companies including Warby Parker, West Elm, and Williams-Sonoma. These and other student events are all about exposing students to the triple bottom line, providing career networking opportunities for McDonough undergrads and graduate students who want to have an impact and purpose in their careers. As we go to the next slide, other really exciting developments this past academic year. Of course, with Vishal Agarwal, the faculty director, we were able to launch the Certificate in Sustainable Business for the MBA programs. And I just wanted to take a moment to thank the Business for Impact team, Joe and Christine and Lauren, for all the work you did behind the scenes to plan and develop and help launch and market the new certificate. We've got a great cohort with more than 45 students in the class of 2021 engaged and really excited about new programming coming online this year. Some of the research that Business for Impact is getting ready to publish and hit the send button on include a new study on workforce social enterprise and the state of economic mobility in the United States with our founding partner, Bank of America. We've been doing a lot of research around foundations, lots of great publications and research coming out from our team this year. And some new developments that are kind of breaking news on the next slide. I'm excited to share for the very first time, there will be a new social marketing for global good course offered here in the business school. It's slated for spring 2021. We just got the final faculty approvals on that. It'll be taught by Business for Impact partner Gail O'Sullivan, who's a global expert in social marketing and behavior change. And Business for Impact is literally just drying the ink on the DocuSign documents for a new engagement with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. They've reached out to Bill and me and the team for expertise on strategy and social marketing to advance their programs in women's economic empowerment worldwide as part of Melinda Gates's new billion-dollar commitment to that movement. So lots of great projects coming up next year. Students get to work on all of these projects and more. And we just want to take a moment to thank the students, our staff, the faculty, and especially when it comes to the MBA certificate to Paul and Dennis and Pietra in her vice dean role before Dennis. You've all been real champions of our work in sustainability and launching the MBA certificate, and we're looking forward to really growing our offerings in the coming academic year. Now, it's in this context, Joe, as we go to the next slide, that I want to delve into the content and for this webinar. You know, right before COVID hit and the pandemic started to cause the health and economic crisis that we're all dealing with right now, you know, sustainability, ESG investing, it was all top of mind for business leaders and society. One of the questions that we think about a lot at Business for Impact is, what are companies doing now, right? I mean, entire industries are imploding. We know that many companies are just trying to stay afloat. What's happening with their commitment to corporate social responsibility, and how has COVID-19 impacted how business is responding to this health and economic crisis? To address these questions, we've got two great guest speakers, and I'll introduce them now. First, we'll have Bernard Boudreau. He's a member of the Business for Impact team, but just prior to joining the Georgetown family, Bernard served for several decades at Target Corporation, most recently as Director in Corporate Social Responsibility, and has led stakeholder engagement initiatives for the company for many years. Bernard also advises the Association of Corporate Contributions Professionals, ACCP, which is a membership organization for all the CSR corporate leaders for many of the global brands that you all know and love. And he also advises BoardSource. Now at Business for Impact, Bernard runs our New Strategies program, which is an executive education program for nonprofit leaders. More than 1,000 nonprofit leaders have walked through our doors and received training on revenue diversification strategies. This program is sponsored by more than 24 companies. Some of the biggest sponsors include JPMorgan Chase, American Express, Thrivent, and many more. And Bernard's in constant touch with his colleagues at these companies and with the nonprofits to find out how they're reacting, responding, and trying to stay afloat during COVID-19. Our second panelist is Hemal Vidya. Hemel's a partner with Deloitte and has been there for, I think, nearly 25 years, working on key engagements in US health, defense, working with Homeland Security. Hemal also runs the India office and team for Deloitte. He's a visiting lecturer at the business school, a coach, and we're very pleased that he and Bernard serve on our advisory committee. So Bernard, Hemal, welcome. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your expertise with us. I'm going to start off with Bernard and ask you to just set the stage. Talk to us about what's going on in retail and Target and what the prospects are for your colleagues in the industry. Over to Bernard.
Leslie. So first off, at a 30,000-foot view for everybody, retail is big. Retail is important to America. So retail is the largest private employment sector in the United States by far, employing approximately 16 million people in the US. And when you think of retail, remember, it's everything from the little corner store bodega to the flower shops to grocery stores to national chains. And it is probably one of the hardest hit by this pandemic. And to answer your question directly, Leslie, retail's in trouble. That's the end of the story. Retail's in trouble, but I'm not going to end the story right there because I'm going to give you some examples of trouble. 16 million people work in retail. Last month of April, over 1 million retail workers filed for unemployment based on this pandemic. Now, stores that sell grocery, hardware, pharmacy, those that are considered essential, and they, for the most part, have remained open. But everybody else, apparel stores, jewelry stores, technology stores, music stores, home accessory, furniture, all of those, as you can imagine, are closed. And they've been closed for a couple of months. Very, very few businesses have 2 to 3 months of operational reserves available for them to fall back on. So, with stores shuttered for 2 months, they're in trouble. 2 national department stores, Lord & Taylor, Neiman Marcus, old brands that have been around for a long time. Lord & Taylor, been around since 1879, whatever. They both filed bankruptcy last week. Most retail experts expect that GameStop, J.Crew, JCPenney, Sears, a long list of others will be filing soon also. Brands that we all know, shop across the nation. Now, there are other retailers, big names, that aren't filing bankruptcy, but they're shuttering, permanently closing select stores based on this pandemic. Macy's and Nordstrom's are the 2 that most recently announced that they'll be shuttering select stores permanently. Now, to be fair, all of the brands that I've mentioned have been in financial trouble before the pandemic hit. So it's not as if this was it, but they've been working on a plan. In the pandemic, for many of them, is the straw that's breaking the back. Now, aside from the household names, there will be thousands of small local stores that will be closing based on the results of COVID-19. Strategic Resource Group, which is a national retail consulting firm, they predict that over 25,000 retail stores will close by the end of 2020 as a direct result of COVID-19. To be fair, many retailers are leaning in, if possible, to their online business since they're shuttered from guests coming into the stores. But most don't have an online business. And according to the National Retail Federation, only 10 to 11% of retail sales actually come from online. The majority come from traffic feet in the store. Some retailers are finding more creative ways to service customers and remain relevant. For example, we see curbside pickup for a lot of stores. Best Buy is a great example of their stores are closed to customers coming in, but they do have curbside pickup. Order online, drive by the store, they'll put it in your car, not a problem. So that said, that's a 30,000-foot view of how the retail sector is faring right now. I think a fair word to use would be devastating. Now, as we see communities and stores start to reopen, the retail community by far are looking to each other, looking for expertise and guidance, operational guidance, especially on how we can operate in this new norm. That's what everybody's looking for now. So I'm going to stop now and turn it back to you, Leslie. You're on mute.
Thank you, Bernard. Yeah, I appreciate that sobering look at what's happening in your industry. While you were speaking, one of the attendees on our webinar requested that we change the speaker view so that whoever's speaking can be more prominent in the screen. So that's why you see our pictures shifting now as we took down that title slide. Let's turn to Hemel. So Hemel, you've been at Deloitte for more than 2 decades. You consult with many industry leaders, advising them on strategy and operations. What are you seeing? What are the trends that are most prominent that you want to highlight for members of our community here at Georgetown McDonough?
Thanks, Leslie, for the question. And to all members of our Georgetown family, I hope that you and your families are healthy and well, and to the extent that you can be sane at the same time. Those of you who are about to join our Georgetown family, an incredibly warm welcome. What an unusual time to join, but I can't think of a better family to join when times are tough. This is an institution which has powered through so many important things in our world, and I think they will power through this one with equal, if not greater, success. I would say, Leslie, since Bernard answered his question from a 30,000-foot level, I will actually answer it from the 50,000-foot level, because professional services, first and foremost, is about serving clients. And so our impact, for the most part, when it comes to advisory and consulting businesses, is really dependent on the spending appetite, the tolerance, and also the investments that our clients make. So if we think a particular industry like retail that Bernard talked about is taking, as you put it, a devastating downturn, the time with which we need to understand that it's going to have an impact on the professional services industry is going to take a little bit of time. So I won't answer my question directly in terms of verticals. I'll answer it more in terms of the offerings and the services, if you will, the horizontals, to use our MBA terminology, that we're seeing our clients focus on. And those horizontals include the following. Number one, an increased need and an intensity for accelerating digital modernization. If this pandemic has taught us nothing, it is that all of us, regardless of size or mission or industry, need to be able to operate in a digital economy. And by the way, that's far more than just having a meeting via Zoom or telephone. That's really thinking through how do these organizations, all of us, now operate when we may not be physically together for a long time. That includes things like supply chain, our technology modernization, our ability to bring together data from different sources and to analyze that into meaningful information. So digital modernization is absolutely a key theme. I would say a second one that this pandemic has brought to light is supply chain and security of the supply chain. How is it that products can move and be created not only within our country, but as we're seeing in earnest in this pandemic, a supply chain that really is borderless, and the ability to make sure that operations can continue and businesses can keep their goods and products moving in this day and age is incredibly powerful and important. I would say a third theme that our clients are beginning to wrap their heads around even more so is future of work. How is it that we design an organization and upskill our existing talent with the tool set and with the resources necessary to be able to operate in this environment? And I would say that the final major theme that we're looking at right now is continuity of operations. God forbid if this pandemic either returns or comes back in a different format, either later this year or in subsequent years, we need to embed in our client's organization and operating model a continuity of operations so that it becomes part and parcel of their governance, of the way that they operate, just as much as they take a look at their financial statements or at risk management or technology. Make sure that they can continue is an equally important theme. And I would suspect, Leslie, as a final thought, that if we were to have this webinar a couple of months from now, we'll start to see even more themes emerge. Because of the scale of this crisis, this is a situation that's going to require all of us to keep thinking about the new topics that will become a permanent part of our economy going forward. Thanks, Leslie. Back to you.
Hemel, each phase, whether we're in immediate crisis, response, and recovery, requires continued adaptation from both companies as well as government responses and the nonprofit sector, which we'll get into in a minute. As I ask the next question, I just want to invite the participants on this webinar. You have an opportunity to pose questions of your own on the Q&A function at the bottom of the Zoom screen. So feel free to throw out questions. Joe's going to collect those, and we're going to tee up some during the live Q&A portion of this session in just a few minutes. But before we get to audience questions, I want to go back to both Bernard and Hemel. And, given the very sobering statistics and trends that you shared, let's talk specifically about corporate responsibility now, right? We came into 2020 with this heightened focus from leading investors on ESG, environmental, social, and governance performance. Are companies just throwing ESG out the window as they try to stay in business and maintain some semblance of a bottom line? Are companies leaning in to their CSR, or maybe both? Bernard, let's start with you. What's your perspective?
So a short, succinct answer to your question is yes. I'll turn it over to Hemel. Corporate responsibility is my passion. It's what I work on. It's what I talk to people about every single day. So the answer actually to your question is yes. It's business as usual for some. It's digging deeper for others. It's, oh, hell to the no. We're just trying to keep our head above water and stay afloat. So it really, really varies. We're seeing the full gamut of behavior from companies that are out there. And I'll speak again specifically to retail and manufacturing because that's one that I'm most intimately involved with. Some retailers are stepping up and doing some stuff that makes us all proud. And it's like, yes, this is an example. Some retailers are moving forward with business as usual. We just got to do what we got to do. And there are some retailers out there that are exhibiting some shameful, egregious behavior. Some that are doing 2 out of the 3. some that are kind of erratic and doing all three. They're fantastic and they're egregious based on behaviors and what they're doing. When I think of corporate responsibility, Leslie, I had the opportunity to speak in one of your classes last September. And if any of those students are on there, remember, I really focus on the 5 Ps when I talk about corporate responsibility and how corporations, how businesses within those Ps are responding to be strong and responsible. And those Ps are people, policies, products, places, planet, and philanthropy. That would be 6 Ps. Okay, I said 5, it's 6 Ps. I can't even count today. But when it comes to stepping up specifically, I want to talk about 3 things. I want to talk about retailers specifically that are stepping up, and we should all take note of the work that they're doing. There are some retailers who are operating business as usual. Not going to name names there, and I'm especially not going to name names when I get to the retailers that I would say are exhibiting some behavior that's egregious and what not to do in a crisis. Product. Some retailers are doing some fantastic things with products, specifically making things to address the needs of the community during this pandemic, things that they don't normally make. And we see that, whether it be hand sanitizer or face masks, personal protection equipment. The Gap, Estee Lauder, L'Oreal, LVMH Corporation, Nike, Under Armour, they're producing hundreds of thousands of products, and for the most part, donating them to first responders and the medical community. And these are products that they do not normally make. They do not have to do this, but they are doing this because they are a responsible corporation and they're doing what needs to be done. And I applaud them for that. When you think of companies using their resources, so Target, for example, my former employer, they have a heavy hand in the wholesale community. And we find that there are small businesses who could not get their hands on those handheld forehead thermometers. Target purchased over 10,000, worked with a manufacturer to purchase over 10,000 of those handheld thermometers to provide at wholesale costs. They didn't give them away, but at small businesses who normally couldn't get them or get them at those prices. Target also provided tech support to the state of Minnesota, who was bringing in lots of personal protective equipment, but had no place to warehouse them, didn't know how to keep track of the inventory, and didn't know what to do to get it back out to the community, the logistics support. So Target lent their logistics experts to go out and work in those warehouses to figure out how to make this available and create an online system for that. Home Depot, Crocs, Nike, all donated product that they normally make, but they donated the product to first responders to help them get through. Now, Walmart is a really good example of using their resources. As the CDC was trying to roll out their testing, Walmart basically made use of their parking lots, because Walmart's all over the country, made use of their parking lots for the testing to happen, and used Walmart pharmacists to go out and help provide the testing and provide guidance to the CDC operators who are out there. Again, fantastic use of resources they did not have to use. In addition, we see retailers who were giving cash, making cash donations, which is always much needed, and providing space for first responders to use. I consider all of those great examples because the retailers are doing things they did not have to do, but in fact they are doing. Now, moving on to business as usual, the media has talked about a lot of these examples that they're calling responsibility, but in the Bernard world of corporate responsibility, I'm not giving you extra points for this. I'm not going to give you a great corporate responsibility partner for doing some of this stuff. So we see retailers who are having special hours for special guests. So the elderly, folks with special needs. Okay, I call that good business. I don't call that being responsible. Now, you keep that up constantly, then we can talk about giving you an award for being responsible. Okay, now I'm gonna get one that really gets me going. The retailers who gave a temporary raise in salary or a one-time bonus, or we're gonna give you medical benefits as you're working through this special time. That ain't corporate responsibility. That's not being a responsible corporation. If you make that permanent, now we're talking. If you really want to get an award, let's talk about livable wage. But they are doing something. So I'm just going to say that's business as usual to do what you need to do to keep the business running. We see some companies who are manufacturing more of the product that they normally make in order to meet the demand. That's not responsibility. That's making what you make in order to meet your demand. That's business 101. Teach that in the School of Business and we're good to go. So no extra points there. But at least you're doing it. And then the last one, I'm not gonna name names here because you can look them up. I'll tell you where to look it up. Are those companies who are just egregious in some of the things that they're doing that just make me cringe and make all of us talk. Now, the sad thing is some of the ones who are egregious are also some of the ones who are doing some wonderful things. When the pandemic first hit, there are some national craft retailers, a couple of them, who decided not to close their doors as the government instructed in order to maintain this virus. They had their employees make face masks, and that was the excuse why they could stay open. Many of the employees complained about that. The stores then, in fact, did close. But for quite a while, they remained open, putting both customers and employees at risk. That was a bad move. The biggest challenge out there that the public does not know about, and then I'm going to turn it back to you, Leslie, is the supply chain. And when you think about it, it makes sense, but most of us aren't aware of how the supply chain works and how we get product in our stores. So the Workers' Rights Consortium has a COVID-19 tracker, which they highlight which retail brands are standing by the suppliers and the products that they have already ordered and that's being manufactured. Business sucks. There is no question about that. And inventory is piling up both in store and in warehouses and in manufacturers. So it's a tough road to be, it's a tough place to be in right now when you've missed your Mother's Day sales, you've missed Easter sales, you've missed all this product and there's more coming in. Unfortunately, we see retailers who are canceling product. There are honorable companies, and I'm going to tell you who those are, who have made a written commitment that they will stand by every order that they have placed, which again, these orders were placed a year ago, before we even knew about this. Adidas, H&M, Nike, Target, Van Heusen, VH Corporation, which includes Dickies, North Face, Timberland, Vans, they've all made written commitments that they will stand behind all of the orders that they've placed. But most national brands that we all know and love have not made that commitment, and they're canceling billions and billions and billions of orders for a product that has already been made. And the repercussions of these cancellations are far and wide. Factories that for the most part have low wage earners, China, India, Bangladesh, those are extremely hard hit. Now, specifically, according to BSR, the Business for Social Responsibility, over $2 billion of orders of garments already made in Bangladesh. Just Bangladesh alone has been canceled. That affects over 2 million workers. 80% are women who work in those factories for a minimum wage. So the ripple effect is huge for that. If you're curious to see which companies are on the good side of that commitment and the bad side, you can visit them at apparelinsider.com. Apparelinsider.com. I'm going to name who's who, but you can go check it out yourself. Martin Luther King Jr. once said, "The ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands in times of challenge and controversy." The same applies to business. Where do they stand in a time of challenge? Businesses, retailers challenged right now. Everybody's hurting. But enough, at least don't make it worse. That's all I got to say for that right now. I'm on my soapbox, so I'll back away. Leslie, back to you.
Oh, yeah. No, Bernard, thank you for that. A lot of really great stuff we're going to dive into in the Q&A there. Hemel, tell us from your perspective where you think things are going in terms of corporate responsibility and ESG.
Sure. Leslie, let me just first say two things. One is I think you're setting me up for failure by having me follow Bernard every single time we do one of these questions. And the second is now we know better when Bernard begins an answer with a quick one-word answer, then expands on that, because then we got to hold on to our seatbelts. But a pleasure and an honor to hear his really great insights. So thank you, Bernard, for that. I think when it comes to CSR in what I would call a post-COVID economy, Leslie, I will actually add 3 Ps to the 6 that Bernard offered, and that's public-private partnership. And I have the honor of teaching a course to the MBAs on this topic of P3s. I'm going to put that in the context of corporate social responsibility and ESGs. You know, traditionally, until about a few years ago, and certainly before Business for Impact's leadership in putting Georgetown on the map in this topic, I think a lot of people thought about CSR as either donations in terms of capital or the provision of goods. I think now when we take a look at CSR in the context of this pandemic, we're going to now have to think about CSR in the context of public-private partnerships and a more nuanced, multifaceted way in which the private sector is going to support what are essentially public policy challenges. And I'll give you 2 specific examples of how I see this theme now of P3s manifesting itself in our post-COVID economy. The first is, and I think we all would agree, we're all very troubled by this, is the exposure in our country to the digital divide. The fact that so many of our nation's children are unacceptably not learning when we have access to devices, to the internet, to the spawning of 5G throughout our economy, not only nationally, but globally. But when this is all said and done, and I think when education officials, perhaps even including Georgetown, start to analyze the impact that the last 7 or 8 weeks have had on our children's education, in part driven by unequal access to digital solutions, to platforms like Blackboard, to even capital devices like a high-speed internet connection or to a dedicated laptop, and what that means for children who are spending 8-10 hours a day trying to do the best they can in this new paradigm, we all as a society have to think about what type of education do we want to have, regardless of whether you're in a public school or a private school or even home learning for that matter. So what role do P3s have in that? One of the things I think that not only consulting firms, but education institutions are going to be looking at is how do you bring together the public sector and the private sector to start to really address this gap? Because now we've learned, unfortunately, all too quickly that we don't have time to waste. And especially if this continues past the summer and affects all of our fall semesters, either by completely being virtual or by having a hybrid or something in between, how do we keep the trains moving and make sure that a large part of our population, the future generations of our society, have equal access to education? So working on what does a technology infrastructure look like? What does an education platform look like? How do you make sure that teacher exposure continues as best as it can in the age of the digital divide is a big topic when it comes to public-private partnerships that I would absolutely put under the umbrella of corporate social responsibility. The second major topic and theme that I start to see under the areas of P3s, but also CSR, is access to affordable healthcare. And the fact that another grave mistake that this pandemic has exposed, unfortunately, disproportionately affecting minorities in our society, is unequal access to healthcare. And if somebody gets infected, the higher propensity that they have for those symptoms to intensify and really make it difficult, not only for themselves, but for the families that are supporting them. So what does it mean for public-private partnerships? I think one major theme you'll start to see more and more in the area of future health is how do you make telemedicine more accessible? How is it that you use digital apps and access through even things like Zoom or Skype become, if you will, a medical service? a very big theme that started about 2 years ago in the government was this notion of software as a medical device. For the large part of our upbringing, we always thought of medical devices as X-ray machines, as needles, as the capital assets and the hardware through which we get medical treatment. Now, however, even before COVID, we used our phones, we use our apps on our devices to measure our blood pressure, to measure our heart rate, to do retina scans, and in some cases to actually provide medical input or lack of complete access to an in-person visit to a doctor's office. One thing that this economy has taught us now is that expansion of telehealth and getting equal access, or at least greater likelihood of equal access to health in this COVID environment, all in the context of a P3, is going to be another major big theme. So a long way of saying that when I take a look at CSR now, this summer and fall, and I think for years to come, it's going to be more than, I think, our traditional notion of what social responsibility is. It's also going to include how do we provide services that bring together various parts of our economy, public, private, NGOs, and nonprofits to serve public policy problems. So back to you, Leslie.
Oh, it's right on point, Hemel, in terms of, now more than ever being able to work across sectors, public, private, and nonprofit, to tackle complex challenges, because we know that given the complexity of the big challenges, whether it's a pandemic or climate change or getting health accessibly and high quality to all people, no one sector can solve it alone. And I think it speaks to why it's now more important than ever that McDonough is really training leaders on how to work across sectors and manage people's interests, the planet's interests, as well as profitability. It's an art as well as a science. And I think the stories that both you and Bernard have shared point to the fact that those companies that have figured out how to sustainably operate, whether it's signing that commitment to make good on their purchase orders to the supply chain producers out in Bangladesh and other parts of the world, and to students and vulnerable populations, they've already built those muscles. And probably it's going to serve them well in terms of creating value for shareholders as well as for society going into the future.
Yeah, Leslie, if you don't mind, if I could actually add a thought to that and a special shout out to our incoming students, if that's okay on this point.
Absolutely.
So
and when
I
you
would.
found oh, go ahead.
I would say, in addition to my service as an adjunct faculty member, and also as an employer at Georgetown, the hat that I'm most proud of is actually being a Hoya, being an undergraduate alum from the School of Foreign Service. And when I was at Georgetown, a lot of my classmates thought that if you went into the private sector, that you were not living up to the Jesuit ideal of service to others, or the whole notion of cura personalis, and the notion that we bring together different dimensions of our existence to make the world a better place. I think that this COVID situation has really put an institution like Georgetown in the front row because of our commitment to service and helping others. And now, not only is it the right thing to bring in the private sector to solve public policy problems, now it's essential that we bring in the private sector to solve public policy problems. And when I think about Georgetown's role in our country and also around the world, another distinction that I'm really happy about and proud of is that even though I myself am not Christian, I'm really proud of the fact that Georgetown is our country's oldest Catholic university. And what this university does when it really becomes tough for our society or in a moment that matters, I think can have a positive ripple effect throughout the economy. And so when we think about the services and the academic learnings that we're going to now take as part of our givens, if you will, going forward, Georgetown is uniquely positioned to be able to, I think, place a premium on bringing together various parts of our economy. So sorry, Leslie, I thought I would just add that plug.
No, I'm so glad you shared that. And you know, if the measure of a man is where he stands in a time of crisis, certainly the measure of a university is as well, right? And you're telling, I think, a really important truth here about Georgetown and the leadership role that we can play, our students, our faculty, our staff. And I do want to also say for those prospective students, perhaps we'll come out of this webinar with the 9 Ps between Bernard's 3 Ps, and we got our public-private partnerships from Hemel. You know, Porter has his 5 forces, marketing has their 4 Ps, but we're gonna have the 9 Ps of sustainability coming out of this. Okay, so let's go to some questions from the audience and participants. Joe, do you wanna tease those up, or do you want me to just read those off the Q&A?
Yeah, Leslie, I think let's take one. Somebody wrote in and was asking about the sources, best sources of information for reading how companies are tackling CSR problems now.
All right, well, Bernard,
I'm going to jump in there right there. So one of my favorite resources, I'm actually based in California, and BSR, Business for Social Responsibility, is based actually here in San Francisco. They are, if you don't know Business for Social Responsibility, bsr.org, check them out. They're a fantastic resource for a wide range of businesses. It's a membership organization, and they exist to counsel, support, and educate businesses on how they can be more responsible, both at home in the place where the business is located, as well as globally. And BSR has offices all over the globe, and they do a really wonderful job. Check out their website and you'll see a lot of things that are happening that they have their fingers on the pulse of, or that they counsel and advise major corporations on. That's the one I'll give you, otherwise I can spend 20 minutes on this.
Hemel, what are you reading?
You know, I think that it's going to take a lot of time for the dust to settle, right, to come up with definitive sources. I actually, and this may sound like a very, very mundane answer, I probably spend a solid 90 minutes every morning reading a blend of the Financial Times, The Economist, and the New York Times and the Washington Post. Because in some cases, these things are moving so quickly and with such fluidity, it's hard even for some of the sources that Bernard mentioned to get up to speed, you know, that quickly and comprehensively. So absolutely, you know, I think his sources are spot on, and that's a great recommendation. But we're living in a situation right now where the world is changing in some cases for the worse, literally every 8 to 12 hours. If you take a look at the statistics and, you know, the banners that appear, pick your network of choice, at how quickly this pandemic in some cases is intensifying, especially globally. The ability to get real-time information, I think, is paramount right now. So that's what I'm doing. And I do that not only as, you know, as an advisor to my clients, I just do that hopefully as a good citizen to make sure I'm up to speed on what's going on right now.
Yeah. I would say as an adjunct faculty, and for any of the faculty on the call, I keep a close eye on there's a really great newsletter that's put out by Aspen Institute's Business and Society program, and it's Ideas Worth Teaching, and it gets into all the different curricular approaches to sustainability and stakeholder capitalism and CSR and all of these topics. Okay, let's take another question. Joe, do you want to tee it up?
Yeah, question here about PPPs, which Hemel was discussing, specifically about how sometimes they're a little bit detached from public policy demands. So the question was, are there good examples of demand-driven PPPs in development specifically, and how could this coordination be improved?
Well, if we thought that there was not sufficient demand or a clear articulation before this crisis, I can bet my bottom dollar that there will be intensified demand coming out of this, and probably for the rest of our lives. I think a really good example of P3s is the one that I mentioned, software as a medical device. Let's take a look at the criticality of software companies, of medical technicians, of the medical community, working hand in hand with regulators to come up with a paradigm that actually allows for safe and effective use of apps and software to collect clinical information. And you apply that to the use case of infections and to the pandemic. I can't think of a more salient, visible, high impact use case for a public-private partnership. And by the way, full disclosure, no one will confuse me for being a medical expert or a public health professional. I'm a guy who likes to advise clients and offer my best thinking. So take that with a grain of salt. But I think that it's important to understand that the nature of getting to a solution, even pre-vaccine, in this COVID situation is going to require public-private partnerships. There is no way, even with the best of intentions and not a political statement, there's no way we will get to the level of testing, of contact tracing, of tracking of data without integration between the public sector and the private sector. If you take a look, for example, at the daily press briefings that executives at the state, municipal, and local levels are giving every single day, and their ability to collect real-time information, in some cases minutes before a daily press conference, a lot of that work is actually being done in conjunction with the private sector, because the infrastructure resides there. In some cases, if you will, the expertise resides there. So I think the situation that we're living in right now is probably the most clear, high impact example of P3s. And I think that's with us now for the rest of our lives. I think gone are the days where an ideology can dictate whether it should be purely public or purely private. The lines are increasingly, and in some cases, intentionally blurred. Leslie and Joe, back to you.
Thanks, Hemel. Joe, another question?
Yeah, question here, and I know we want to get to Bill's closing. What are the skill sets and knowledge that Georgetown graduates will need in a post-COVID economy?
Great question.
I'll take
Hemel, when you are hiring young, eager employees, what today, what will you be looking for?
It's a great question. It's one that I think about quite a bit. Not only, by the way, for undergraduates, but we've got to keep in mind that this is affecting all of us, right? So even MBAs, executive MBAs, those of you who are coming into the graduate degrees of Georgetown, you're joining at a time that's probably the most precarious in our lifetimes when it comes to job prospects in the next, I would say, 12 to 36 months. This is far more severe than 9/11 in terms of the magnitude of the issue than the 2008 financial crisis, or even going back farther, to date myself, the explosion of the dot-coms in 98 and 99. I think what we're looking for is first and foremost a recognition that what's going to be more important for our clients going forward, it's not only the IQ, meaning the subject matter of data analytics, of digital transformation, of finance, a lot of the bread and butter subjects that you would expect me to say. I think what's going to be more important going forward is actually EQ. And we live in a paradigm now where EQ is probably more important than IQ, because our ability to be able to work with our clients on really tough problems, in some cases that affect issues of life and death, is going to require our Georgetown graduates to not only bring the head smarts, but, if you will, also the bedside manners. And so I think what we're looking for is not only a set of people who want to consult and serve clients with disciplines and the know-how, but also take the time to be able to build relationships with people who are going through really unprecedented challenges. And I think for us in the consulting profession, and I'd say that as a person who's not only a partner at Deloitte, but somebody who's passionate about serving clients, that's going to be the distinguishing element for those who succeed in a post-COVID economy. I think all of us can find access to the book smarts, if you will, What we're really going to need are people who can explain it and take the time to nurture the relationships with our clients in really this unprecedented challenge.
I want to piggyback on what you just said. I agree with you wholeheartedly, and really briefly, Leslie, because I know time is to get to the question that Joe said also from a corporate responsibility and to the relationship thing that Himmel just brought up. Communicate extremely strong communication skills, verbal as well as written, because you've got to build those relationships. Stakeholder engagement, stakeholder relationships are critical in corporate responsibility, specifically if you want to go that direction. It's not about, oh, I want to save the world and I want the planet to be better. Yeah, who cares? It's got to be about how do you build those relationships in order to move the business forward. And then secondly, operational skills. The examples I gave earlier from strong corporate responsibility response, those are all actually operational procedures, not philanthropic, not save the world. It was how do we use our operations to move forward? So to tell students what they need to focus on the business and how do you communicate. It's not good enough to do it. How do you communicate what you're doing and what you're trying to do to build those relationships?
Oh, great points. You know, I actually want to get in with Bill on this question of PPPs and what's required, because over his long and several decade career, he's worked in all the sectors and driven change. So Bill, we're going to turn it to you for the close. But let me just say, I'm so inspired, Himmel and Bernard, by your thoughts, your experiences, and what you've shared with us today. It's just been really powerful, and I'm sure Bill agrees with that sentiment. Over to you, Bill.
Thank you, Leslie. Yes, I agree wholeheartedly. I want to say Bernard and Himmel, those were just absolutely terrific insights. Thank you so much for that. We didn't get a chance to answer as many questions as we would have liked. So what we're going to do is keep this open for another 15 minutes. I'm going to turn this back to Joe Weinstein in a minute to do that. But just in terms of closing, as we heard, these are difficult times. Nobody's going to say differently. But our coming academic year is going to really be a good one for Business for Impact. We've got a lot of momentum, all built around the triple bottom line. We're going to launch that new MBA certificate in sustainable business that Leslie talked about with Professor Vishal Agarwal, and our whole team will be involved in that. We're going to offer a new course in social marketing and global good. It's going to be a really good course. And I'm looking forward to participating and helping with it. With our partner VF Corporation, and Bernard mentioned them, we're going to have a really great sustainable case competition that's scheduled for this fall. We're going to advance our many corporate and nonprofit partnerships. And we're going to involve undergraduate and graduate students from McDonough and across the entire university on the triple bottom line, and in terms of student interests and student careers. Somebody asked, what is a good source of information? Well, one good source of information is us, Business for Impact. So we encourage you to get in touch with us, ask us any questions you may have, faculty, staff, students, incoming students. And we also invite you to join us. We have a great team. So thank you very much. Joe?
Great, thank you, Bill. Thank you everyone who was able to join for our webinar. We're right at 3 o'clock Eastern, so we're gonna formally end right now, but if people wanna stay on and if people have further questions, our hosts and panelists have agreed to stay on for another 15 minutes to continue the conversation. So thank you everyone very much for joining us.
Himmel, when you brought up the education and what we're lacking and missing, I was going to bring the choir in to start backing you up and singing a song right then and there, but I decided that was inappropriate for now. So I'll just tell you right now, while the audience is still there, I could not have applauded that comment more. I come from a long line of teachers, and several of my family are still teachers, and just we've known the inequities were there for a long time, But what this virus, what this pandemic, the light it has shown is just incredible on the haves and the have-nots in how we educate our kids.
Yeah, thank you, Bernard. I wish it were not true, right? And shame on all of us for allowing this to happen, because now we're really caught flat-footed. I would say as an anecdote, and I know we have participants on it, but I'm happy to share this little bit of light humor in given the times that we live in. My daughter is in 6th grade. She's 12 and a half, and she thinks that she has it tough when teachers at school ask her to do X, Y, and Z. And she thought she would have it a little bit easier now that she's undertaken, like all of us, distance learning, right? Where she has to do everything at home. Little did she realize that my mom, her grandmother, was a very strict teacher in India before they came to the US. So now my little girl is actually dreading distance learning because now not only does she have to answer to her teachers at school, now she has to answer to the real teacher at home. And so I don't envy her. But to the point of digital divide, I think about the experience or lack thereof that our children are having in this day and age where they don't have, for whatever reason, either the technology or the skilled teachers or the family infrastructure to support them. And I really cringe at the thought of them spending the entire day not getting even 50% of the value that they should be. And they are our future generation, so we've got to do something about this.
Absolutely. The divide in the education between the haves and the have-nots, the divide in terms of access to healthcare, gig workers, who's working during this pandemic and who's not, who gets to work from home, who's on the front lines. I think this harsh light of the tragedy really brings it to bear. One of the questions that I had, and then we're going to go to some more Q&A from the audience because I think a number of the participants are still on with us. Hemel, you talked about public-private partnerships and the need for the private sector to join public and nonprofits. There's a limit to that, right? There's just times when it's not appropriate for the private sector to take on a problem or a challenge. Would you have any thoughts on when that would be the case, when we really need government to lead on something, or even the nonprofit sector?
I think that what's most obvious to me, Leslie, and trying to answer your question legally.
Sorry, it's very garbly. Joe, I'm going to ask you to unmute and let me know if Hemel, can others hear Hemel, Joe, or Bill?
He was muted and garbled, but can we go to questions from the audience? We still have some guests on.
Great, Joe, let's tee some more of those up.
There was a great question about smaller companies and what they can do for social responsibility, given that so much of the support right now coming from the public sector is going to bigger companies.
Let me jump in there. Small companies. Going back to the 6 Ps or the 9 Ps, always start with the people first. Always. Again, thus saith the Gospel of Bernard. But take care of, like the mask on the airport and the airplane, take care of your people first. First and foremost, if nothing else, take care of your people as a small business. Number 2, places. Where are you located? Start at home. What's going on in your local community? What can you do to support and take care of your local community with whatever you have? So what do you have? What do you know? What do you do? Use your expertise or your product to support your local community. And third, product. If you have it and it can at least help a little bit, use that. That's my little 2 cents. Leslie, Bill?
I mean, I would say from the, well, actually, let me go to Hemel, and then I wanted to talk about small businesses from the nonprofit sector point of view, which make up the 3rd largest industry in our country behind retail, Bernard, and behind manufacturing. Nonprofits employ more people, except for those 2 industries. But Hemel, let's go to you, and then I'm happy to chime in.
Sure, Leslie, can you hear me?
No, it doesn't sound right. what I'm going to do is,
I'm going to log out. I'll come back in.
good idea. Certainly nonprofits that are on the front lines of feeding, healing, caring for, and addressing the needs of vulnerable populations are now more important than ever, whether it's Feeding America or the local food banks that are part of that network. And many of them are, struggling because donations are drying up and it's very hard for them to access the Paycheck Protection Programs and the CARES Act federal funding. And they're in the mix there with all the small restaurants and dry cleaners and local businesses. It looks like Hemmel's back. Hemmel, you want to give it another shot?
Yep. Can you guys hear me now?
Great.
Okay. I'm actually going to be very selfish on behalf of the students. And I would say to small businesses, hire an intern. Either frankly paid or unpaid, because all of us need to keep the trains moving here. And, the world does not stop spinning, unfortunately, because we have COVID. So we've got undergraduates and we've got graduate students who are looking for experiences. We also have on the other side of the equation, employers who may not be able to have a full roster of their employees. So why don't we actually do a little bit of supply and demand and Econ 101 and actually utilize the talent pool that we know exists, that we know in some cases there is summer and even looking farther out, their fall opportunities may not be exactly what they wanted, but at the same time, businesses want to stay afloat. So I'm actually very bullish about the role that small businesses can have, in some cases, quite quicker than large multinational, multi-billion-dollar firms, because they don't need to go through a lot of administrative procedures. They can just make things happen and not worry about whether they're affecting the market. They're doing it because they're a local employer in their neighborhood and in their communities.
Bill, do you want to jump in?
No, I have lots to say too, but let's get some more questions. Joe, do you have any more questions from our guests?
I'm looking at some now that are in the Q&A chat. Somebody asked about VCs and kind of short-term versus long-term investing. How is COVID impacting the VC community? How hard is it for for companies that are trying to grow through venture-backed going to be? And I, might throw that to Hemel first, if you have any insights into the investing community.
Lucy, I'm smart enough to know to say that I don't know when I don't know. This is an area that I'm not very proficient in. My gut tells me that we need some time for the dust to settle. I mean, we really, even though it probably feels like years, we are, depending on your calendar count, 8 to 9 weeks into this. So I think that a lot of that's going to be still, to be seen.
I wonder if, thanks Hemel for your candid response. I wonder if anybody on the call has a background in venture capital. Raise your hand on the chat and tell us if you've got a perspective to share. Joe, I think, can open it up to the mic. And meanwhile, we're going to go on to another question so we don't waste our minutes here.
Leslie, I had a question I want to throw out to Bernard and Hemel, looking a little further out into the future to the industries that they were talking about, and if they could maybe talk to us about what they think those industries are going to look like in, say, 10 years.
Wow. So retail has been changing over the past 100 years, period. That's just the state of retail. I have worked for 6 national retailers in my career. 5 of them no longer exist. So retail is changing. You go back 30 years ago, go 20 years ago, and people didn't buy online. They bought through a catalog. So retail is changing. Granted, online purchasing and from retail is 10, 11% right now. It's going to continue to grow. So that's one thing that we'll see more and more online retail, fewer and fewer brick and mortar, which has its horrible or vast implications for employment. Going back to 16 million people work in retail. I think we'll also see a very different way of how product is sourced and shipped in the supply chain. Right now, much of the product, surprisingly, especially in apparel, it's very easy to get out of orders. Years ago, when I was in product sourcing, I could be in Singapore, Shanghai, Bangladesh, have a relationship with Bill Novelli, who's the owner of Novelli Apparel. And okay, Bill, we want to buy 2 million units of these sweatshirts and 1 million of these pants. I want you to start production in 6 months, and we'll get back to you with an agreement. And Bill would immediately go buy the fabric and the yarn and do X, Y, and Z. No documentation. It still works that way today in many ways. So it's really easy if you want to get out of that. But again, relationships are what the business is built off of. That's going to change because too many factories cannot, it's untenable. They cannot operate that way, especially after this pandemic.
Emil, you up for predicting the future?
You know, in some cases, the question is a good one. In some cases, it's easier to say what the major trends will be 10 years from now than what they will be 10 weeks from now, given the nature of this pandemic. And we really don't know when this is going to subside. And what's scary about this is that there's not a clean edge to this, right? This is something that's going to be progressively declining, hopefully. And we won't know for sure when we can conclusively say it's over. With that in mind, I think there are at least two themes that I think about, regardless of whether it's in, consumer business or retail or financial services or telco or even government. One is increased use of digital technologies. Artificial intelligence, machine learning, process robotics, I think are going to be used even more so than ever before. And then the other major theme that I would see is increased reliance on cybersecurity. You know, we haven't talked a lot about that on this call, and I think given everything going on in our lives, we've sort of put that and sustainability sort of on the middle burner, even though we all know that these are issues affecting us. I think as a society, we're all hoping right now that all of the things that Bernard talked about in terms of online transactions and things moving to a digital platform, we're kind of hoping that all of that is as secure as possible. I think in reality, we all know better. So cybersecurity, I think, is going to be even more of a priority going forward, regardless of industry. And I think that ties on to another theme that we haven't talked about, but I'll just put out there is critical infrastructure. And the fact that in today's day and age, as much as we rely on dams and roads and bridges, we've also got to rely on our servers, on our satellites, on their broadband that fuels with equal intensity our economy.
Yeah, which brings to light, the millions of people living in rural America that still don't have access to broadband. And, to get online, they got to go to the McDonald's, and that's it. We look a lot of that through our Rural Opportunity Initiative. Well, I know we're starting to lose more people. It's almost 3:15. I'm going to throw it back to Bill for some last words and insights from where you sit.
I want to go back to something that Hemel talked about and that Bernard reinforced, and that is as we come out of this, possibly a deep recession, we just don't know. People are going to be looking at where do we want to go as a country? What do we want to be as a country? I think healthcare is going to be a big, big issue because people are seeing what it's like not to have health insurance and access to care. I think this whole issue that Hemel talked about in terms of inequality, let's call it, the idea of social determinants of health, the idea that your zip code means more in how long you'll live than your genetic code. All these really big issues. These are CSR. These are triple bottom line. These are shared value issues. And as we go forward, I think, Leslie, that our team will be looking at this. Our partners will be asking about this. And so I think it's going to be a really interesting time. And as Himmel said, short-term and long-term.
Well said. Thanks again, Hemel, Bernard, Bill, to the Business for Impact team, Lauren, Joe, everybody who worked behind the scenes to make this event happen. Thank you. And hope everybody has a good and healthy rest of your day. Be well.
Thanks all.